F1. Red flag. Red flag's to slow down. What?
The checkered flag is waiting.
I can see our Checkered Flag podcast being quite spicy.
5 Live's Checkered Flag podcast.
Welcome to an increasingly windy Hard Rock Stadium, home of the Miami Dolphins, and of course this weekend home of the 2023 Miami Grand Prix. I'm Christian Hugill, and joining me is our commentator Harry Benjamin and the former Formula One driver Jolyon Palmer to take a look through qualifying. And what a qualifying it was. Jolyon Palmer, Sergio Perez on pole, Fernando Alonso second and Carlos Sainz third. We'll take you through the rest of the top 10 in a moment. But how surprising is that, Jolyon Palmer?
Yeah, I did not see that coming, I'll be honest. It looked like it was going to be Max Verstappen on pole. I mean, he's looked so hooked up through the weekend, had not made a mistake until we got to Q3, and then he made the crucial mistake. Got wide at turn 6, missed his lap, needed a second lap to try and fight for pole, and Charles Leclerc crashed, having made his own mistake, and cost him and anyone else the chance. So it was a bit of a topsy-turvy one, and it sets us up for a bit of a thriller tomorrow, I think.
Harry, all weekend we've been saying that Checo Perez has been struggling for pace in the practice sessions. He hasn't really looked like he could take the fight to Max Verstappen, and then guess who's on pole? Sergio Perez.
Yeah, well, he put it in when it counted, didn't he? Verstappen couldn't get his first banker lap in. He made a mistake, and that really was it, and he paid the price for it. The track was completely resurfaced coming into this weekend, and grip was really at a premium, certainly through the practice sessions. And Perez himself admitted he was struggling. It felt like he was driving on intermediate tyres. But Perez, I think it goes to show that his mental strength is so strong as well, because he's able to just keep chipping away at it, keep improving, not listening to all of us that are piling on the pressure left, right and centre. And in the end, he's rewarded with pole position.
But hang on, it's not his brilliance that's done it. It's Verstappen making an error. He did well. He did do a good lap at the end, and it was nearly as good as Verstappen had done in Q2. But he has been up against it, and this was really a gift for Checo to be on pole when he's been up against it this weekend, and Verstappen made a rare error. The championship pressures are up, and it's Max that cracked.
You make your own luck, though, don't you, Jolyon? And Checo didn't make a mistake, and Max did. So on that basis, he deserves pole position. Oh,
he deserves pole position, yeah. But I'm just saying, it's not that he did the wonder lap to get it. He deserves pole because, as you said, he didn't make the mistake at the end. But I don't think this was like a turnaround in his one lap pace, basically, to achieve it. He's not beaten Max in a completely straight fight, I think, because of the way that Verstappen was denied a last chance to improve. He made one mistake at a costly time, and it means he starts 9th. And Perez, he did do a good lap, but I don't think it was like a straight fight. Wow, he's just done him for pace. It was a mistake from Verstappen, who backed out the lap.
Let's hear from the man himself, your pole sitter, Sergio Perez, speaking to me a short time ago. Checo, you admitted that the practice sessions had been a bit of a struggle, but did anything significant change in qualifying?
Yeah, I think we did good setup changes that brought us back into a better rhythm.
In terms of the race tomorrow, how much of a threat do you expect Max to be coming from P9? And given that you've mentioned that it's really tricky offline and the walls are famously close to the track at this circuit, could it be a bit of an interesting race?
Yeah, it could well be a very interesting race. So a lot of things can happen, definitely. So yeah, just looking forward massively to try to get a good start and try to do my own race.
So that was Sergio Perez. Understandably, he's a happy man. Max Verstappen, not so much. Jolyon, how disappointed will he be in himself that he made that mistake?
Yeah, it will be really disappointed because he's looked so hooked up this weekend. He's not really put a foot wrong in 3 practice sessions and 2 parts of qualifying. But the crucial part is Q3 if you're a Red Bull driver. And he did make a mistake in a corner that seemed pretty easy to make a mistake, the same corner that Leclerc crashed on the next lap. And for Verstappen, who he looked a shoe-in, really. Every time he's been in the car after FP1, he's been at the top of the times. He just pushed too hard. It shows that he's absolutely on the limit, trying to fight off the attacks of Perez or the Ferraris, potentially. And he will be left to rue that one, because around this sort of circuit, you might not get a second chance. Street circuits, yellow flags, red flags can happen.
Harry, I don't know about you, but this is why I love Formula One. A weekend looks like it's going in one direction. Max Verstappen looks the ultimate shoe-in for pole position. and then the tiniest little error and it's all changed and we get a mixed up top 10 running order. It's fantastic, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, for Charles Leclerc, he probably won't be thinking along the same lines as we are, but it certainly spices things up for the Miami Grand Prix on Sunday. I mean, there's some other standouts. Kevin Magnussen up there. We were looking actually in the commentary box, the top 6. The top 3 rows are all different constructors, and we were trying to find out, thanks to somebody on the hashtag BBCF1, when the last time was that happened, and we deduced it down to 2. The 2021 Belgian Grand Prix. That was the last time we had 6 different teams in the top 6 positions, but there's contempt over how that race played out because it didn't really play out. So then you go back even further to 2012 and the German Grand Prix. So in itself, that just highlights that I think we're going to be in for a bit of a cracker.
Good stats there, Harry Benjamin. We'll take you through the rest of the top 10 in a moment. But first, let's hear from the man who qualified 9th, Max Verstappen.
I mean, to be honest, I didn't really have a lot of issues until what happened to me in Q3. So, yeah, very positive weekend, of course, up until now. But, I made a little mistake myself, a bit offline, and then that just cost me the lap time. I had to abort. Then, of course, you still have one attempt, but you hope that no one will create a red flag, and then that happens again. So it just snowballed into a tough ending.
You enjoy a challenge. What's going to be possible from P9 tomorrow?
We have a good car, so for sure we're going to be quick tomorrow, but minimum P2, but of course I went into this weekend, of course, going for only one result, and that was first.
Max Verstappen there speaking to us a little earlier. That gap at the top of the championship is just 6 points. Jolien, could this be significant in the championship fight?
Everything's significant at the moment. There's championship battles to be played out between the 2 Red Bull drivers, and Perez has a decent chance of taking the lead in the championship now tomorrow. It's a bit like Jeddah all over again. Verstappen is the pace man. His drive shaft went in Jeddah and he's left in 15th on the grid as Perez is on pole alongside Alonso. And, OK, this time it wasn't a drive shaft, it was driver error for Max, and then a bit of bad luck, predictable bad luck at the end of qualifying. But it's the same result. Perez on the front row from Alonso, and Max has it all to do from 9th. In Jeddah, it was a 1-2. And if it's the same result tomorrow, then Perez is championship leader after 5 rounds.
We've been talking all weekend long, though, about these shortened DRS zones that we have around this Miami track. It's the same in Baku as well. The driver's complaining that it's going to reduce the amount of overtakes. But are we expecting then, from a Verstappen perspective, is he just going to be able to come and carve through and get to the front and the back of Perez? Or now, is this going to be proven more difficult thanks to these shorter DRS zones?
He'll still do it, so long as they're not in a big DRS train. That's where Verstappen might struggle a little bit more. If you've got Magnussen, who starts 4th, with Gasly and then Russell and then Leclerc, they're kind of all in reverse pace order from 4th down to 7th. And if none of them have enough oomph with the DRS to get past and they're all stuck in a train, that's the sort of thing that will be a nightmare for Verstappen. If he can catch them all isolated, it'll be a doddle for him. That Red Bull is just a beast when it opens the DRS. We've seen the last 2 Grand Prix, he's made mincemeat of race leaders Hamilton and Leclerc with drive-by overtakes, even at the shortened DRS of Baku. Everyone else was complaining the track was so difficult to pass on, and the Red Bulls were just flying by, getting back to the racing line and turning it in for turn 1. So it should be okay. The DRS train will be the concern for him.
It's a fascinating point because I've spoken to quite a few teams this weekend who think that the shortened DRS zones will make it more difficult to overtake. So let's find out if that's the case for Red Bull. Obviously, they've got such a pace advantage, but we'll soon find out. And obviously, the resurfacing we've heard so much about this weekend, it's making it very slippy offline. Online, there is more grip on the racing line than there was last year, but off that racing line, it's incredibly tricky. Throw into the equation the weather. We're seeing increased wind speeds here in Miami, potential of rain. It's been forecast all weekend that we could get showers tomorrow. It could be really interesting, Jolien, in terms of the conditions tomorrow.
It could be. The conditions are already pretty tough today. The same factors. The wind was really picking up towards the end of qualifying. The track, as you said, slippery offline. It's tricky out there, and that's why we've seen quite a few errors through the weekend. I still think for Verstappen overtaking, he doesn't have to go offline very much to make a move so far this year. He can blast past on the straight and be ahead and take the racing line still into the next corner with the speed that they've got. So I still don't think for him it's going to be the be-all and end-all. It'll just be the tighter pack. Alonso trying to cling onto a podium. That'll be where it's advantageous having the shorter DRS when he's got maybe a Russell or a Leclerc coming in behind him. For Verstappen, I still think he's got enough. But then you talk about the weather as well. That's not going to rain, is it?
You're not thinking it's going to rain on Sunday. I mean, today, even though it was bone dry, it felt like a wet weather qualifying session at one point, especially in Q1 and towards the end of Q2 as well. The rate of attrition for these tyres, and it really was last man over the line to set the quickest lap time. Do we want a bit of rain tomorrow? I don't know. I think we've got a jumbled up grid. I don't think we need the rain.
It's going to be fun regardless, isn't it? We haven't even mentioned yet, Leclerc obviously starts 7th after his crash. We've got Hamilton in 13th. We've got Stroll even in 18th in quite a quick Aston Martin. That might be, it's going to be a real test of these shortened DRS zones because we've got plenty of cars starting out of position.
Well, let's actually look at the rest of the grid then, shall we? With obviously Sergio Perez on pole. Fernando Alonso, very happy to be back on the front row in his Aston Martin in P2. Carlos Sainz is 3rd. Kevin Magnussen in the Haas up in 4th. A fantastic qualifying for him. Pierre Gasly in 5th. Much better from Alpine this weekend. They had a nightmare in Baku. George Russell 6th. He said that was pretty much the best he could have possibly hoped for. He said that flattered them up in 6th. Charles Leclerc 7th, we've just been speaking about. Esteban Ocon 8th. He thought there was even more pace in that Alpine. Max Verstappen 9th and Valtteri Bottas 10th. And we'll talk a little bit more about Charles Leclerc in a second. But first, let's hear from the man himself after that mistake. Here is Charles Leclerc.
I basically just overpushed and that's it. I went for it as I always do in Q3 and that was too much.
How are you feeling about tomorrow? What's recoverable, do you think?
Well, I mean, there's still all to play for tomorrow. We are only starting 7th, which is honestly not too bad considering the really bad job I've done in Q3. First lap, I do a really, really good lap and then I lock up and then I put it in the wall in the second lap. So again, this is not the level where I want to be. Very disappointed with myself. There was the potential to do great today and I put it all in the bin. So hopefully tomorrow I can do a better job.
That was Charles Leclerc and we will talk about that mistake and more in a few moments' time. Welcome back to the Hard Rock Stadium and the Miami Grand Prix. We've just had qualifying and we're talking about that on the Chequered Flag podcast with me, Christian Hugill, Harry Benjamin, our commentator for the weekend, and the former Formula One driver, Jolyon Palmer. And before that little break, we heard from Charles Leclerc, very downbeat. We know how hard on himself he is, and we've seen that once again, admitting it simply wasn't good enough from himself this weekend. Jolyon, as a driver, when you're so disappointed with yourself after 2 mistakes in a similar position on the same part of the track for Charles Leclerc, how do you pick yourself back up again?
Well, I think largely his talent will do it for him. He's such an exceptionally quick driver that it's not going to be long before he's got tomorrow to try and race back through, and he's got a good chance to overtake some slower cars ahead. Of course, Verstappen's going to be charging past him at some point, you'd have thought, but Leclerc can still be in the podium fight from where he is. And then it's just qualifying form for Leclerc. He's got great form. I mean, this is the guy that took 2 poles last weekend. He's so quick in qualifying, but he does crash a bit. And this is the thing. It's gonna. Well, will it start weighing on his mind at all? Because he's building up a bit of a reputation for just being win or bin.
Well, this is it, isn't it? When do we start asking the question more seriously? Charles Leclerc, one of the immense talents we have on the grid, that is undisputed, but when are we going to start saying you're crashing too much? Last year, Paul Ricard, that costly mistake in the race, Imola last year as well, it's a repeat thing. We said win it or bin it multiple times across the coverage after his free practice shunt as well. It's all well and good being on the very edge, but if you keep going into the wall, that in the end is not going to be what will get him, what he hopes, will be a championship one day.
And that's the level that Leclerc can be as well. He was championship contending last year. He can do it again. He has the X factor, I think, of Formula One talent. He is there with Hamilton and Verstappen, but at the moment he is behind them because his consistency is just not as good. And if he can sort it out, then in the right car, he can be a champion. But it's interesting at the same time as there are some rumours about him potentially being linked with Mercedes in the future. Mercedes will be looking at this and thinking, is this guy the full-on rounded package to potentially replace Lewis Hamilton in the future at some point and lead their charge? There are still question marks on Leclerc, and incidents like today, he had the lock-up already, which is why he was only 7th heading into the last run, and then lost the car at turn 6. Sort of these incidents just count against him a little bit. It's the inconsistency that he needs to improve, because his pace generally is rapid.
And that's the thing with his teammate, though, isn't it? Sorry, Christian, just to say, with Carlos Sainz coming third on the grid, Sainz, OK, may not have as many standout moments and perhaps the Hollywood star quality that Leclerc has, but he's consistent. And that keeps him ahead of him in the driver's standings for the time being, and it racks up more and more points for Ferrari. He's not putting a scarlet red car in the wall, and that, I think, piles on the pressure for Leclerc.
It slightly reminds me of, go back to earlier in Max Verstappen's career, and people were saying with him, listen, there's no doubt he's crazy quick, but he needs to cut out the sort of erraticism. Is erraticism a word? Have I made that up?
We'll go with it.
I might have made that. Yeah, we'll go with it. He needs to be less erratic. He needs to not crash quite as much. And of course, the 2021 season proved that he'd very much done that. You know, we didn't see as many mistakes. He did win the World Championship. I can't help but feel like Charles Leclerc has been in Formula One long enough now that we shouldn't really be still having this conversation. But to counteract that, Jolyon, is he having to push harder because he's never fully had a car that is up there with true World Championship winning pace? And he did say that he's having to take more risks on setup. Does that play into it?
No, I'm not having that as an excuse, to be honest, for Leclerc. Because he did last year. He did have a car for the first half of the year that could fight for the championship. And yet he crashed at Imola. Yet he crashed from the lead in Paul Ricard. Crashing in the race on your own is never great, but from the lead of a Grand Prix, that happens extremely rarely. And Leclerc was already erratic in the championship fight with Verstappen, and part of the reason that he dropped back. Okay, Red Bull developed their car into a world beater last year already, but Leclerc lost so many points from his own driver errors as well, and then the strategy, and then everything else that went against him. So I don't just think he's having to go 110% the whole time. He's choosing to go 110% the whole time. And when he gets it right, again, unbelievably quick. And more often than not, he gets it right and he's unbelievably quick. But just a few times a year, he has these bloopers. And we're off the back of 2 qualifying sessions in a row where it's happened. And I think that's why it feels particularly prominent right now. Last week, he was the hero over 1 lap. But today, certainly not King Charles.
And just to pile on the pressure for Leclerc, I know we've only had 4 Grand Prix, but he's only, well, excluding the sprint, not a Grand Prix, but he's only finished 50% of the races so far this year. And for a man of his calibre, driving for a top team in a Ferrari, I don't think they could accept that with that form continuing. They're not going to bin him off tomorrow, are they? Of course not. But he's got to be able to find that balance of pushing to the max, but keeping it consistent and perhaps reining it in slightly when he needs to.
It slightly reminds me of the Sebastian Vettel situation at Ferrari. We knew about his speed, but he undoubtedly made too many mistakes when he was wearing red, and it stopped him from taking the fight to Lewis Hamilton. And really, you know, we've said before that perhaps if Fernando Alonso was in that car in those years, he might have won a world championship. Is there something in the water at Ferrari, do we think?
Well, it's the curse of the scarlet cars, isn't it?
The pressure.
The pressure, but there's also nothing quite like driving for Ferrari, I would imagine. It's always on everybody's list if you're a Formula One driver. Jolyon, was it ever on your list? Do you think you could have made it to Ferrari?
No, I was just a Renault through and through.
Yeah.
I was, yeah.
From day dot, the end goal was Renault.
Yeah, I had Renault in my blood and made it there. And I thought, you know what, Ferrari come calling, I'm going to turn them down.
Not for me. No, absolutely not.
Red's not his colour.
No, I just don't fancy seeing red. As I say, a really good performance from Kevin Magnussen, who should get an honourable mention at this point in P4. I had no idea of the order of the midfield pack. It's fascinating. I mean, I really hope that the DRS situation does enable us to get some midfield squabbling tomorrow, because the midfield looks absolutely fascinating. But one man who is, well, smack bang in that midfield when he really wouldn't have expected to be is Lewis Hamilton. And it must have been a good qualifying session, because we've only got to this point in the podcast before mentioning that Lewis Hamilton was P13. Let's listen to what he had to say.
I mean, we've not been quick all weekend, so just a bit frustrating that we didn't get into Q3, which we should have. But, I'll make do with what I have.
It sounds like it's quite tricky out there grip-wise. Was that one of the main issues?
At the end, there was just... I went out behind a bunch of cars and they all slowed down in the last corner, and I was the last one of the last ones in the group. I just lost all the temperature in the tyres.
Jolien, Lewis Hamilton so downbeat, pretty much saying, yeah, that's where we are. Not saying there was a mistake, not blaming traffic, saying, yeah, that's the pace of the car at the moment. And even George Russell a little earlier said to me, oh, P6 flatters us, almost saying that he should have really been about where Lewis was. What's gone wrong for Mercedes this weekend?
They just don't have pace. They've not brought upgrades to the car. That's coming on the next race, and my word, they need it, because they just don't have pace. The balance has been okay. They just don't have the downforce at the moment to move forward. They've also got a slightly draggy car with long straights here. That's not really helping them out either, and it was certainly a hindrance in Baku. For George, 6th place is definitely flattering his level of performance today as well. He did well to get into Q3, but Bottas never ran in Q3. I think Ocon was on used tyres, and then you had the Leclerc and Verstappen duo, who obviously should be ahead as well. So George has actually done well to be 6th place and can salvage something for Mercedes tomorrow, because I think it actually makes the picture look better than it is. They were both almost out in Q2. They were both needing laps at the end of Q1 to get through.
It was also just a bit scrappy from Hamilton, especially in that Q1 session. You got caught up behind the Haas of Kevin Magnussen, and that is still under investigation as we record for impeding. So we'll see what happens to that. Keep an eye on the 5 Live social medias for that. But that forced him to have contact with the wall. He was locking up at turn 17. I know a lot of people were, but it was also just a bit scrappy. So, we'll see what happens to Jolien. You don't think anything's going to happen with that investigation, do you?
No, that'll be fine. They were both on slow laps, and that was the odd thing about it. Magnussen was starting into the final corner, ready to go for a next lap. Hamilton never should have been caught out when he was not pushing himself, and so it was a strange eye off the ball moment for Lewis. And then in Q2, he actually did a good lap in Q1. In Q2, he just didn't improve right at the end. Just missed up a little bit in the first sector, lost the rhythm of the lap, and there was just so much pressure all the time on the Mercedes drivers, because they had to hook it up to just scrabble through to the next part of qualifying. The inherent pace of the car isn't there.
I mean, anyone who was with us for our commentary of the free practice sessions will know that bar the very end of free practice 1, Mercedes have just not looked comfortable all weekend. As soon as George Russell got in the car in free practice 1, he came straight back in again and said, guys, we need to look at this. This is just awful. And I'll tell you what struck home with me, Jolien, is when I spoke to George Russell after qualifying and said, well, what is it that's wrong? Why is this track so bad for Mercedes? Literally just went, I've no idea. I don't know. We just don't know. I'm guessing for a driver, Jolien, that is really concerning when you come off the back of such a stinker and just go, I don't know. I don't know what to suggest.
Yeah, definitely. It's much better to have a problem that's obvious, a big balance shift that you need to cure some understeer or some oversteer, and you can make a change, or a certain problem that you can get on top of. But to be just scratching your head 5 races into the season, they do have an upgrade at the next race, which they'll hope can launch them back towards the front end. But their situation is really, really bad at Mercedes. It's such an underperformance from them, from where they were at the end of last year. Last year was already a poor season, but to then actually go backwards at this stage, they were more competitive last year than they are this year, and we know how much stick they were getting then. So, this is a terrible situation for the team that arguably could have the best overall driver pairing on the field.
Lewis Hamilton was obviously downbeat. You'd expect that with P13. What really surprised me, though, I reckon that's the most downbeat I've seen George Russell all season. And he qualified P6. And obviously that looks on paper not too bad, but he knows just how bad things are. So, yeah, a really, really bad day for Mercedes. Let's take you through the drivers that went out in Q2. Alex Albon, when he got to the track this weekend, I had a chat to him and he said that if you designed a track that doesn't suit the Williams car, it would look an awful lot like the Miami Grand Prix, and yet he finds himself in P11. He was absolutely delighted with that, really surprised with the car's pace. Alex has done a fantastic job. P12 for Nico Hülkenberg. We've already spoken about Lewis Hamilton in 13th, Guan Yu Zhou in 14th, and it is Nick de Vries 15th, his first time out-qualifying his teammate Yuki Tsunoda this year, and obviously Nick de Vries making it into Q2, which he will be very pleased with. Lando Norris 16th, Yuki Tsunoda 17th, Lance Stroll, a proper shot. We've not spoken about this, have we? P18. Jolien, just on that very briefly, if we all know that Lance Stroll's father owns the team, so it's not like he's going to be under too much pressure. But even though there are odd circumstances this weekend with the track being as slippy as it is, if you're P18 and your teammates in P2, it's going to be on your mind going into Saturday evening before the race tomorrow, isn't it?
Yeah, Aston Martin, they saved a set of tyres in Q1, and that put both Stroll and Alonso in danger of going out. And Stroll was actually only a couple of tenths down on Fernando, I think maybe 2 or 3 tenths down on Alonso in the first part of qualifying, because they went a bit bold with the tyre strategy, and with the way that the track was evolving, it really didn't pay them back. Everyone that put on new tyres and went for a lap ride at the end, they got it in because there was no yellow flags at the end of Q1, and the new tyres gave them such a load of performance, and it caught out Aston Martin. Stroll went out, Alonso was only just through as well, and so they looked a little bit silly at that point.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Stroll can actually take a bit of heart from that. It's not just a terribly lousy performance that's left him down there. It's a strategy that didn't pay off. And okay, he's missed a couple of tenths to Fernando, but that's not that bad for Stroll.
It's actually more surprising, I think, to see Alonso so high up, because really, in the practice sessions, both Aston Martins looked a little bit mid-pack, off the pace compared to where we're now used to seeing them, which is right up there. So a bit of no man's land in practice, and ending up, as Jolien says, not quite how they wanted both cars to go. But I think we'll see Stroll come through the field quite nicely.
You're absolutely right, Harry. 19th was Oscar Piastri, and you just look at Logan Sargent in P20. Again, that looks terrible, considering Alex Albon's in 11th. But actually, Logan Sargent was only 2.5 tenths off making it through to Q2, and only 3.5 tenths off Alex Albon's pace in Q1. So again, it looks awful, but actually just shows you the finest of fine margins in that qualifying session. So yeah, those drivers can class themselves as slightly unlucky. Right, let's get some predictions then. Harry Benjamin, to you first. What sort of race are we going to get tomorrow, and who's going to be our winner, do you think?
We're going to get a Miami cracker, mixed up grid. I think we're going to have a light splattering of rain mid-race, which is going to really ruffle the feathers. And at the end of it all, it's going to be Fernando Alonso who wins. Why not?
Ooh, bold. I like that. Okay, good.
Or stupid.
Well,
what on earth? What on earth is going on here?
Well, but bold is one word. Let's expand on it. How's
don't ask me to expand.
No, I think we should now. What is that rain that's going to cause that?
I think he'll a bit of rain will spice things up, jumble up the order. Fernando, we all know he's a wily fox. He'll get in front. It's a sort of half street track. I think he'll get his elbows out. He'll somehow get in the lead, and he'll keep everyone behind him in a classic train. We know Fernando Alonso loves to keep a gap. We saw it in Monaco last year, didn't he? He was driving around, keeping a massive gap, and all the other cars kept up behind him. I think he'll do that tomorrow.
Harry, one of my first appearances on the Chequered Flag podcast was guesting with the team in Bahrain in 2022, and I said that Charles Leclerc would win, and everyone had the same reaction. And guess what? Both Red Bulls broke down, and Charles Leclerc won. So it could happen, and you'll sound extremely clever if it does. Jolien Palmer,
well, hang on. Leclerc did start that race on pole, though, in the fastest car in Bahrain.
Hey,
it's not quite the same as Harry's ridiculous prediction.
I don't like a boring prediction. Think outside the box. It's Formula One.
You're preaching to the converter, Jolien. I was the one that picked it. You know, take that up with Jack Nichols, Jeddy Gow, and the other three.
And they were stunned that the pole sitter might go on to win the race.
They were stunned.
What is the quality going on here?
They were stunned, and that's
Benjamin's
why I got invited back.
next to me as he realises he's just come out with the biggest load of drivel ever.
Can I backtrack and go?
I'm now thinking the regulars are equally out of their depth here.
I'm going to go for Verstappen win then in that case.
Well, hang on, Christian. What are you saying for this one then?
I think it will be a Sergio Perez win, and I think that Max Verstappen will be second, and I think Fernando Alonso will be third. And I also think we're going to get a fun race. And Jolien, are you glass half? You know, obviously Miami wasn't spectacular last year. Before we get your predictions, Jolien, do you think it will be a fun, better, more interesting, more exciting race?
Oh, surely. With the grid that we've got, I've quite enjoyed the weekend so far. I quite like the asphalt's been pretty universally disliked by the drivers because it's been very difficult offline. It's given us a lot of action, and it will hopefully be the case tomorrow as well. I quite like now that the DRS zones are a little bit shortened, because hopefully the overtaking that we will get tomorrow will be of a higher quality than just drive-by passes all the time. And I think your prediction is pretty reasonable. Perez, Verstappen, Alonso. But I'm going to say that I think Verstappen still wins the race, you know, from ninth. He's just looked so good this weekend. I still think when it comes down to it, tricky circuit, wind conditions, I don't think it will rain, but even if it does, it will be Verstappen who's, benefiting the most from that, surely. I just still think he can win it from there.
You're both so boring.
Well, I'm going to go Jolien's prediction was bold and Harry's was, let's say, erratic. Let's say it's an unusual prediction. But Harry, I respect it. I don't mind that at all. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. Harry Benjamin, our commentator this weekend, and the ex-F1 driver Jolien Palmer, thank you very much for your thoughts. Please join us for our live coverage of the Miami Grand Prix. We are on air on BBC Radio 5 Live from 8 o'clock tomorrow evening. It's lights out at 8:30. Don't get caught out by that. A half-past race start for reasons best known to Formula One. So don't get caught out. Join us for our race coverage tomorrow. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.